Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to uBracketology. I'm your host, Ryan, or Splash, whatever you want to call me, that's fine. Joining me today are Alec and Jacob. We're here to tackle a Sweet 16 in the Elite Eight. How's it going, guys?
Doing good, Splash. Doing good.
I'm fine. It was a crazy weekend. I was drained by Monday night. Just 4 straight days of watching basketball. It was very tiring.
And some of those late games were really intriguing too. Like the Abilene Christian Texas game, of course. I think Syracuse was in the late window twice, right? Like there was some it was wall to wall action. You couldn't take a nap. You couldn't miss half an hour here, half an hour there. It was, all 4 days. It was lit basketball for 12 hours, 14 hours.
Yeah, for I think 10 minutes, I kind of fell asleep during the Arkansas Texas Tech game. And Arkansas was up 13 when I fell asleep. And then 10 minutes later, I wake up and they're up 2 with 2 minutes to go. And I was very confused. But that was I was just so tired that day. But that was the only rest I took.
Absolutely. So the games restart on Saturday. We have the Sweet 16 is set. I have it running through the ticker. We have an Oral Roberts 15 seed for only the second time ever. We also got 12 seed Oregon State, 11 seed UCLA, 11 seed Syracuse. So 4 double-digit seeds. That doesn't happen too often. The Gonzaga region is fairly messy. There's no 2, 3, or 4 seed that are replaced with Creighton, USC, and Oregon. Guys, what do you think the best region moving forward will be? Who's going to have the best 3 games of basketball this weekend?
I don't know about best 3. Best 1 is going to be USC and Oregon. I think that's going to be all offense versus all defense the whole game. It's going to be USC's length versus Oregon's under 6'8" lineup, just running around and shooting threes all day. That's going to be exciting all the way around.
Absolutely.
I agree. And USC also played an incredible offensive game versus Kansas as well. There was nothing they couldn't do on Tuesday night. It was actually disappointing that every single game on Tuesday, I believe, Monday was a blowout. I don't think there was one close game on Monday. The Oregon-Iowa game was a really fun first half. That was I think that was one of the most fun first halves of basketball we saw all weekend. But besides from that, most of the games were not boring, but they just weren't even close.
Right. I know I was a little less interested on Monday. I made some bets with my buddy, and we were kind of back and forth. Should we pick say LSU over Michigan, or is Oklahoma going to cover? Turns out Oklahoma didn't cover. Turns out LSU isn't that good at basketball. It happens. So it was an interesting weekend, but I totally agree with the USC Oregon being the highlight of the weekend. They played once during the season. USC took the dub. Oregon's going to look to have a bounce back game, but they played one of the best games I've seen a tournament team play in a long time against a really good Iowa team. Offensively, almost every shot seemed to be falling. I think for a long time they were shooting 57% from the field. That's putting the 2014 Spurs to shame. They were so great offensively. And of course, USC has Evan Mobley and a very strong defense, but Oregon can really score the basketball. And if it comes down to making shots late, I trust Oregon a little bit more than USC. So I would not be surprised if they pull the upset as a 7 over the 6 seed.
I have Oregon in my Final Four, so I sure hope they can win.
Ooh. Okay. I'd like to hear the explanation on why they beat presumably Gonzaga.
Yeah, I am obviously beating Gonzaga. The best explanation that I could give you was all the good stuff that I read about the Oregon Ducks. It was they have 4 upperclassmen in the starting lineup. There are 5 upperclassmen in the starting lineup, 5 guys who score double digits. I remember we watched that Iowa game. They didn't get their first bench point until like the back half of the second half. So their starters are so strong, their starters are so good that I just felt like you're not going to get 5 better starters in any team in the tournament other than Oregon. And that was my thought process there.
That's interesting because I did remember that. I think when they put up that graphic, I think Oregon had like 70 points at the time, and it said all 70 their points were scored by their starters. Like, that's just ridiculous. But the thing with Gonzaga is their depth is great, and Oregon's bench will have to step up somewhat in a game versus Gonzaga.
Absolutely. Oregon, again, the high-powered offense against Iowa, excellent performance. They didn't play Saturday night, sorry. VCU Oregon was canceled with COVID. VCU had a couple positives within the group, and it was a no contest. Oregon wins 1-0. So if you bet on Oregon, I think you won. Or if you had Oregon in your bracket, you technically won, even though there was no game played. So I feel bad for VCU. They play all these games, and then their season ends because of a COVID issue. So I feel bad for the group that got COVID.
I felt really bad for the kids, but Oregon was going to blow them out, to be completely honest.
That's true.
Thinking that too. They were probably going to get boat raced.
If you had VCU over Oregon and you were mad that you lost points, I don't feel bad for you because VCU had no shot of winning that game.
Yeah, I didn't think that was much of a 7-10. It felt more like a 4-13 to me. Like, VCU was like a solid team, but Oregon, as they showed against Iowa, is very, very good. And the Pac-12 as a whole, the only teams that's lost is Colorado, right? Every other team's currently left, right? Oregon State, Oregon, USC, UCLA. So a strong performance from the Pac-12, and a comparatively weak performance from the Big Ten. Oh boy, Jacob is shaking his head. Tell us about your Buckeyes.
As somebody who watched most of the Buckeyes games this year, I can't tell you that I'm surprised watching this team choke the game away late. They almost choked away Purdue in the Big Ten tournament game away late. They almost choked the Michigan game away late. Somehow Purdue and Michigan weren't able to capitalize on those opportunities. But this was a team that was inconsistent the whole year. They don't have any big man play other than Liddell, who was barely a big man in his own right. He's just 6'7", and they ran into the nation's leading scorer. As Alec told us all week long to watch out for Max Abmas and Oral Roberts. This team completely fall apart before, and I watched them completely fall apart again.
And we look at the rest of the Big Ten. Michigan's the only team left in the Sweet 16. They're the 1 seed in the East. Purdue fell in the first round to 13-seeded North Texas. Wisconsin lost to Baylor in the second round. I don't remember that game being particularly close. Illinois got upset in the second round by 8-seed Loyola Chicago. Maryland got killed by Alabama in a 2-10 matchup. Who am I missing? Michigan State lost in the first 4.
Rutgers.
Iowa.
Iowa got dismantled by Oregon. They had like 8 teams
and only one's left.
Yeah, and Rutgers, I'm sure Alec can speak better to this, but they didn't play particularly aggressively against Houston. Like, they had all the chances in the world, but they just said, we don't really want to lose. So they didn't take any of their chances, and Houston is sitting here in the Sweet 16, and they are a 2 seed, but they might be the worst team in that region because Oregon State's playing incredibly well. They're probably the hottest team in the country. Loyola Chicago is not an 8 seed. They're really a top 8 team, let alone 8 seed. And then Syracuse is my pick there. Shout out to Adam. But that's pretty scary that Houston might be the worst team and they're the 2 seed now.
That Rutgers game was infuriating to watch. With like 2 minutes left, they just decided to take 25 seconds off of the clock each possession. They played they played like what you said. They played not to lose, and they lost because of it. Also, they couldn't grab a defensive rebound. It was one of the. It was probably the worst. The worst collapse of the weekend because they have that game won, 100%. And I think the coaching was horrible. I felt bad for Ron Harper Jr. He had a great season. I don't know what year he's in. I hope to see him again next year. But yeah, I felt bad for Rutgers because they felt like the better team most of the game, and they blew it. But how about Maryland though? Killing Connecticut in round one.
Okay, I guess I'll speak about that. Okay, so Maryland did beat UConn. It was a game that was much closer than you might imagine if you watched it. If you watched it like without the score, like say in the 1980s when they didn't have the score always at the bottom, you would have felt like Maryland was up 50. UConn could not hit a shot. They at one point were having a bottom 10 shooting performance in the tournament since 2010. This is like Butler in the title game in 2011. This is that one year that Syracuse just shut down everybody and went to the Final Four, and everyone was shooting like 22% against them. UConn was, I believe, ended under 30%. Now, they scored a lot of points, relatively speaking, because they grabbed offensive rebound after offensive rebound. The first possession of the game, they had 4 or 5 different possessions, like with an offensive rebound here, offensive rebound there. James Bouknight was horrendous. And this is a team that, you know, I'm a UConn fan, obviously, and I thought they were going to beat Maryland, and I thought they could beat Alabama. Turns out if you can't hit free throws and you can't hit shots, you can't beat anyone. So it was quite a disgraceful performance. And I know if Coach Calhoun was still the coach up in Stores, they'd be running laps until they like collapsed because he can't stand missed free throws. And I think Bouknight was 1 for 5 or something awful. And like I get the pressures on, you know, it's March Madness. It's a good Maryland team, but holy cow, there are a few performances I've seen worse than that one.
I was actually shocked because besides UConn shooting horrible, Maryland shot the ball extremely well in the first half, and that is something I hadn't seen from Maryland in most games this year. Like they were known for their defense. Daryl Morcell was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. They went on defense and just out defending teams, but they shot the ball really well. And then of course on Monday night, Alabama hit like a million threes, and Maryland's offense wasn't nearly as good enough to even keep the game close. I think they wound up losing by like 32. It was a pathetic performance.
It was an interesting game from a standpoint. Like Maryland was down like 9, and then I looked away for a second, and they were down like 20. And I didn't get a chance to watch that one because I was watching Colorado and Florida State. But I was going to switch over to the Maryland game when that one was over, and then all of a sudden Maryland, like I don't know if they just couldn't hit shots, like you said, or if it was just an Alabama offensive attack. But that game just took a turn for the worse in like 4 minutes.
It was a combination of both. Maryland actually was up 18-14, and then it just went downhill from there. Yeah, they probably got outscored by probably around like 40 points from that moment. It was rough, and I think the people listening that are on the app know how I feel about Mark Turgeon and Maryland's program, so I won't discuss it here. But yeah, it was. If UConn had done that to Maryland, I think there'd be a better chance that Mark Turgeon would be back next year. But UConn decided to lay an egg.
Yeah, when you win a game in the tournament, it's hard to like move off your coach, regardless of like what he screws up. It's similar to any other sport that if your coach overperforms like to expectation, you're not going to fire him. You're not going to fire. I guess the Titans fired Mike Mularkey that one year after they won a playoff game. But outside of that, like I can't think of an example of a team overachieving and then the coach gets canned. But
the Denver Nuggets fired George Karl after he won Coach of the Year one year.
I think the Raptors did that with Dwayne
Raptors
Casey,
did.
right?
And
And then they immediately won the NBA Finals with Nick Nurse. So.
And Mike Malone's also a really good coach as well. So
we should do an NBA show.
I was thinking about that because there's not a lot of NBA coverage. Like the shows on Thursday, Nick and Frankie don't really talk about it. You and Jack on Fridays, you might mention it a little bit, and the show on Monday, the AFC East show, it's all football related. I was actually thinking about that a couple hours ago.
Yeah, I know we're actually we can do some promo. Make sure you like the channel, like the stream, subscribe to the channel, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Periscope. We have some more shows in the pipeline. I'm working with these two fellas for a draft show. So we're going to rock some mock drafts, some prospect big boards. It's going to be nice this next month before the draft rolls out. We're also doing big stuff on the app. Justin from the Monday show, we are working on a 7-round mock draft with users from the app. So if you're interested, shoot JWD a message or shoot me a message, and we can get you hooked up with 2 teams. We're also working on a fully crowdsourced round 1 mock that we're going to push out, yada, yada, yada. Also a polls mock, which might be cool. So like say that the Jaguars are going to have Trevor Lawrence or Fields or Wilson as their as their picks, and you just pick one that you think they'll choose. Super exciting time. And we have some NBA shows potentially coming up, of course, for the draft shows. And we are working on connecting with some NFL players. So exciting time to be a part of the U Stadium Network, ladies and gents.
AFC North podcast.
Also an AFC North podcast. We need to do that. We need to get a good Bengals fan. Joey Heisman, hit us up if you're watching. Which I'm sure you're not because you're in a drunken haze after LSU lost. But
or
that's okay.
Any Steelers fan. Because we could, even though they stink, we could use one.
Yeah, Steelers fans. Ellie, come drop by. I know we've been on a podcast before. Moving right along. Let's head into the Final Four. Let's look one step ahead. Who do you guys have in Indianapolis, April 3rd, duking it out in the Final Four?
I can start. Well, I have 3 of my Final Four teams left. Shout out to Illinois for ruining my bracket. My bracket's still in the 95th percentile. So is Fifth's actually, and both our brackets would be doing incredible if Illinois didn't lay a dud. But with that being said, I think Gonzaga still comes out of is it the East? Oh, no, the West. The West. I think they still come out of the West. I do think the Creighton game could be interesting because Creighton versus Santa Barbara in the game versus Georgetown in the conference championship game, they shot the ball horrible. And versus Ohio, they finally broke out of their slump. They're the best shooting team in the Big East all year. And when they can make their shots and Zagorowski can hit his shots, they're a hard team to beat. And I doubt they beat Gonzaga, but if they can hit their shots, it could be a close game. But even like the saying goes to Oregon, they'd probably have to repeat their Iowa performance to beat Gonzaga. And I think it would be a really fun, high-scoring game. I think it'd be a great game. But, like, I have Gonzaga playing Oregon in my Elite Eight, and I have Gonzaga winning. I don't think that changes. And then I feel confident about Florida State. They're an incredible defensive team, and they get scoring. And I think I love Leonard Hamilton. He's one of my favorite coaches in the country. And I think they beat Michigan and then beat Alabama. And then I still feel confident in Arkansas to beat Baylor in the South Elite Eight. I think Arkansas has incredible guard play. Baylor's really deep. I think Moody and Tate, and I'm forgetting Justin Smith. I think they're all great players, and I think they'll have enough offense to take down Baylor. But in the Midwest region, I have no idea what to expect. I can see Oregon. I can realistically see any of those 4 teams being in the Final Four.
Yeah, absolutely. You start off with the top section of that is number 8 Loyola Chicago, who I had like a dark. I think I said on the show last week that they were the lowest seed I could conceivably see winning the tournament. Here they are. I have 12 seed Oregon State, who's on a roll, probably the hottest team in the country, as I mentioned in the last segment. You have 11 seed Syracuse, who's playing really good basketball right now, and you have 2 seed Houston, who I don't want to say sleptwalked through the tournament, but they haven't really. Like, if you're looking at from a pure, have you played good basketball? I don't know if Houston's played much good basketball in 2 games. Like, you can look at other parts of the bracket. Like, Alabama played really well against Maryland. Oral Roberts has shot the ball really well for the most part. Gonzaga's killed 2 teams. Baylor looked good against Wisconsin. Has Houston looked good? Like, they played Cleveland State. Cleveland State wasn't really expected to do much, and Houston kind of just coasted, And then against Rutgers, as Alec mentioned earlier, Rutgers gave the way. It was more of a Rutgers giving the game away more than Houston like taking the bull by the horns there. So there's a universe that Houston's the worst team out of that 4, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Loyola or lost to Oregon State. If they were to beat a solid Syracuse team, Buddy Boeheim is playing well, and you can't discount the zone, that stupid zone. I mentioned earlier that they are one of the teams that just holds teams down. They've allowed under 30% a couple games in the last few years. So they get a good defensive performance, and Buddy Boeheim drops 25. Houston will get run off the floor.
Yeah, I'd probably take the Ramblers of Loyola Chicago to come out of that bracket because it is really completely wide open. I think the 1 seed's gone, the 3 seed's gone. It's Houston at this point, and I really think that Loyola Chicago is probably the best team on that side of the bracket. I think you could make an argument for Syracuse. I think you could make an argument for one of those other teams, but I'd love to see the Ramblers play in the Final Four again. They're battle tested, and you mentioned the thing about playing good games. They've played 2 great games. They knocked off Illinois. I think that was a wire-to-wire win. They played well against Georgia Tech and battled in that one, so they're ready to go. As for the other regions, I still have Oregon and Florida State. Those are my only 2 Final Four teams left, so I got to root for them. I wasn't high on Arkansas, and I should have probably been higher on Arkansas, so I'll listen to Alec here. I was going to take the Baylor Bears, but I'll take the Razorbacks to knock them off to go with Loyola, Oregon, and Florida State.
Who did you have coming out of that? You said Florida State and Oregon were your only teams left. Who did you have originally coming out of
Ohio
Baylor's
State and Illinois?
Oh, yeah.
I knew I shouldn't have trusted the Buckeyes in the tournament. It was my biggest mistake. They lose every single year to some team they shouldn't lose to, whether it's Dayton or they almost lost to Xavier the one year. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I remember watching that Dayton game. What year was it?
2014.
Yeah, I remember watching it on a little TV in my 7th grade homeroom class, and that was fun. What was that, like a 413?
It was a 6-11.
6-11.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was, I think, my greatest call ever. I had Dayton going to the Elite Eight. Like, Dayton's going to go to the Elite Eight.
I think was that game played in Dayton too?
I feel like it was. It might have been in like Columbus or something.
They play a lot of games in Dayton in the tourney. That's like their
they
hot
usually
spot.
the final. They always have the first 4 in Dayton. Let's see, 2014 Dayton, Ohio State. How fast can I research this? It does not look. I guess all the courts are the same during March Madness, besides the things in the corners, right? Like the brought to you by this school. No, it was in Buffalo.
Oh, I don't know why I thought it was in Dayton. Maybe Dayton had maybe they were playing in the first 4, and that would have been in Dayton. But yeah, I remember that game. That was fun.
Yeah, and Aaron Kraft missed a buzzer beater, and I was jumping for joy because I think that was the one year I had a perfect first day, like on one of my brackets. Now I know I make a bunch of brackets, so it doesn't really matter. But I had a perfect day on one of my brackets, which I've never had before in like my 10 years of filling out brackets.
I think that was the same day 14-seeded Campbell beat 3-seeded Duke. I think that was the same day. And
Mercer?
Mercer, not Campbell. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Mercer game was on Friday.
Oh.
Yeah.
And was that also the year CJ McCollum's Lehigh? No, they also
That
beat
was
Duke.
they beat Duke.
earlier.
That was a different.
2012, right?
I think 2012.
Yeah, because McCollum was in the 2012 draft.
Yeah,
7
that was.
overall.
I remember pulling my phone up after that day in school and looking at that Duke game, the one versus Mercer. I was shocked. Didn't watch any of it.
There's a few like 3-14 upsets that I have no idea that's going to happen. Like the Mercer game. Like if Morehead State had beaten West Virginia, would have saw it. I picked Abilene Christian to beat Texas on the last Friday's show, so I saw that. And I didn't think Eastern Washington was very good. And if Colgate had beaten Arkansas, I wouldn't have been surprised. But the UAB over Iowa State game, the one year, just took me out of left field. But I did have Georgia State over Baylor in one of my brackets. And then the Mercer game. I would live in Georgia, and I had no idea what Mercer was.
I was 2014 also the same year HCA Kentucky beat undefeated Wichita.
Yes.
In round 2. I love that. I had Kentucky in the Final Four that year, and that was probably one of my best picks. I also have whatever year Michigan State made it to the Final Four as an 11 or
20. They were, I think, a 7 in 2015. They played Georgia the first round, and one of my buddies picked Georgia to win the tournament.
Yeah, I had Michigan State going to the Final Four that year too. So I've made some good Final Four predictions in my life. But yeah, that Kentucky Wichita game was really fun.
Mm-hmm. Was it Aaron Harrison that like made the clutch shot like every game?
It was one of the Harrison twins. I don't like the Harrison twins. They were bums, but
yeah,
they both had phenomenal tournament that year. Mm-hmm. Like the Harrison brother, it was like those two just willed Kentucky the whole way. It was just big shot after big shot from both of them. And they were in the Final Four or the finals as the AC?
Finals, right?
Finals. They lost to UConn.
That's what I thought.
James Young had a gnarly dunk like halfway through, and I wanted to throw my controller at the TV, but then UConn held on and won. So, one of the best dunks I've ever seen in like a big game. He just yammed it on. I'm blanking on the generic big man that had 2.5 blocks a game that year.
I don't.
Before my viewing experience, unless it was Xavier.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I don't remember who it was. Shabazz was on that team. Boatwright was like the number 2 guard. I thought he was going to be like the Shabazz of the future. Like 2016, I was super hyped up. UConn can beat Kansas. Yeah, and then Kansas like killed us. It happens.
Do you remember those Missouri teams at the beginning of the 2010s?
With like Phil Pressey.
Yeah, Phil Pressey and Kim English.
Yeah, and they lost.
Kim English actually just got hired as George Mason's basketball head coach, a couple days ago. I'm like, where have I heard that name? I know it's like the first thing I was like, Alex English. I'm like, no, there's no affiliation there. And then I'm like, oh, those Missouri teams with Pressey and Kim English, they were really good. And
really
Kim English he has to be like in his late 20s or early 30s. He's an extremely young head coach. He was off of Tennessee's bench. I just found that really interesting.
Yeah, because that was the 2012 Missouri team was like a 2 seed. They were a top 10 team all year. And like no disrespect to this Missouri team, like in 2020 or 2021, sorry, they were pretty good in their own right. But that Missouri team was pretty loaded. Like you had NBA players. And they just lose to Norfolk State, who had their own NBA player, Kyle O'Quinn, who's still chugging along in the NBA now. like a, I guess, rotational big at this point, like rebounder, close shot maker, tough guy.
So Nick asked what happened to Memphis this year. Nick, Memphis was one of the first 4 teams out, and they're in the NIT, and they actually play Splash's Boise State well, he's not a Boise State basketball fan, I guess, but they play Boise State in the quarterfinals of the NIT tomorrow, I believe. So
they just beat Dayton, right?
Poor Dayton.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor Dayton.
They had Obi Toppin. 1 year they couldn't go. They had Obi Toppin.
Yeah, the 1 year the 1 year they have, because they went to the Final Four in 1967, I think, and lost to UCLA. But the one, like,
UCLA was undefeated, perfect that year.
I think so. So it's like San Diego State had this unbelievable year last year, no tournament. Dayton has this unbelievable year last year, no tournament. Duke was really good last year, sucked this year, no tournament last year. Kansas was great last year. They probably could have won the tournament last year, no tournament. So they're a 3 seed. That's only on name. That's only because they're the University of Kansas. Right.
I also think Maryland's team last year was the best team Turgeon had. I think we won. I think we were Big Ten regular season co-champs. And I think they would have been like
that sounds right.
2 or 3. And I think they would have at least gotten to the Sweet 16.
Mm-hmm. I know. I looked at a 538 rundown, and I believe they were the 2 seed in Dayton's region, and they beat Dayton. Or maybe they were the 4 seed in Dayton's region. They beat Dayton either way. And I think San Diego State went to the Final Four, which would have been exciting, but Kansas won the tournament.
They had a really good team. Anthony Cowan was a senior. Jalen Smith was on his way to being the lottery pick that he was. Daryl Morcell was there. Aaron Wiggins, who dropped, I think, 30 versus Alabama. He was the only one that can score. Eric Ayala, like the whole team that was back this year, in addition to Anthony Cowan and Jalen Smith were on that team. And yeah, Maryland will be horrible next year if Aaron Wiggins leaves early. I think he's a junior. If he leaves early, they'll be horrible. They won't sniff the tournament.
So I want to go back to Nick's question for a second. So Memphis is rebuilding in a way. It's like in 2008 when they went to the title game with Derrick Rose, Chris Douglas Roberts. That's a name that I haven't mentioned in a very long time. Okay. Like that team was great. You know, they've had some teams here and there. And then, of course, the James Wiseman year, they were supposed to be really good, but then Wiseman like played only a handful of games. This year, they weren't supposed to be as good as they were, but they, you know, made it to the NIT. Penny Hardaway is building a good culture down there in Memphis, and they should be a tournament staple for the next 5-10 years, you know, at least until Penny gets, you know, pulled away by a bigger school like it always happens, you know, Shaka Smart, VCU to Texas, and we see it in college football all the time.
I actually think Memphis was a tournament team this year. I think they were
Utah State.
I think they're in Michigan State. Michigan State, after getting killed by Maryland in round 1 of the Big Ten tournament, had no business being in the tournament looking back at it. But so what happened with Memphis was the last weekend of the regular season, they had a lead versus Houston. And Houston hit this half-court shot to win the game. And then in the tournament, in the AAC, right? The AAC,
yeah, American.
They also had a lead late on Houston, and Houston wound up pulling out the win again. And if they get that Houston win during the regular season, then they're in better shape on the bubble. But also, if they get that Houston win in the semifinals, they beat Cincinnati, and then they would have gotten the automatic qualifier. And I think they had some very bad luck with those 2 games.
Yeah, I think they were a fundamentally better team at the end of the season than Wichita State. Like I know Wichita State was the number 1 seed in the American, which is like, wait, Houston went 22-3 or something stupid like that. How are they not the 1 seed? I don't know. Wichita State, I think beat them head to head and had 1 fewer loss in conference. But Wichita State, I didn't feel like they were like actually a good basketball team. I think Michigan State deserved to be in. I don't know why the heck Utah State was there. Like, I follow Mountain West basketball pretty solidly. they weren't very good for large chunks of the season. They lost to Boise State twice, which is saying a lot. So I thought Boise State was a better bubble team than Utah State, at least in its own right. So I was a little confused at Utah State. I get the concerns with Michigan State, but they had big wins over Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State late in the season. I get they lost to Maryland, but that's a tournament team. So when you're beating all these number 1 and number 2 seeds, and then your losses to a 10 seed, I think you're fine. So I would have had Memphis in my field over Utah State for sure. And I probably would have slid UCLA up to the actual 11 line and had Memphis in the play-in game against Michigan State. But, I don't make the brackets. If I did, they would be a little bit different. But hey, whatever.
I have no idea why I picked Utah State to beat Texas Tech. I only watched like 10 minutes of that Utah State game because it was horrible. That was probably one of the their offense just looked horrific. It was so boring. I couldn't watch it.
It's like Texas Tech is good defensively, but Utah State made them look like the 2013 Heat, 72 Lakers, 96, 98 Bulls. Like Texas Tech is like a solid defense, not quite as good as they were like in 2019, but Utah State just didn't do anything right. It was
they actually
be the worst offensive half I've seen in the tournament.
They actually shot a higher field goal percentage than Texas Tech, but what they went 4 for 19 on threes, 21%. They went 5 for 10 from the free throw line, and they had 22 turnovers.
Ouch.
22.
Can't turn the ball over.
Texas Tech 7.
Can't turn the ball over. We saw it with Ohio State. We saw it with Texas. Florida. We saw it with Virginia Tech. We saw it with Texas. You just don't turn the ball over. You at this point in college basketball history, you can lose if you turn the ball over more often than your opponent, because with threes, with some of these teams are great free throw shooters like Oral Roberts, like Colorado. If you turn the ball over, you will lose. If you don't make shots, you will lose. And it sometimes defense at times in the tournament has not mattered. If you miss the shot, you miss the shot. If you turn the ball over, if it's like an unforced error, that's bad. Although granted, it's better than giving them an easy layup. But Florida was a more talented team than Oral Roberts. They lost because they couldn't stop turning the ball over. Virginia Tech was better than Florida. Virginia Tech had like 25 turnovers. Didn't matter, so they lost.
I think Texas also had a bunch of turnovers in the Outline Christian game, and I think they were one of the lowest. They were one of the lowest turnover teams in the country. And actually, Colgate might have beaten Arkansas if they didn't turn the ball over an ungodly amount of times as well, especially in that first half.
I remember that.
They were up 14, and then they just turned the ball over so much after that.
Arkansas went on a 17-0 run, and all of a sudden, hey, Arkansas's in the Sweet 16. They could go to the Final Four. And with whoever's coming out of the Houston region, Arkansas is a decent team to bet on to go to the title game, let alone like just Indianapolis in general. Yeah,
I wish I had Arkansas in my championship game instead of Illinois at this point. But
yeah,
what can you do? I'd be really happy if Arkansas and Florida State both got to the Final Four and Syracuse beats Houston and Oregon wins. I'd feel like I didn't get Illinois right, but I think I had a really good bracket if those things happen.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So we're last week, let me put myself full screen. Last week we did our little mock bracket. We did ran through the first 2 rounds. Sadly, Jacob's microphone decided to die. So we had to skip it with him. But now all 3 of us
made you pick Ohio. You would have been much better off.
Oh, man. I see.
You get to do the second chance bracket.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to go ahead and add that to the stream. And I actually accidentally filled out my Final Four, so let me restart it. How do I is there like a reset button?
There should be.
Okay, we're just going to create another.
So small. I mean, you already have 25. You can make 25 more.
Okay. Actually, I had a note that I was going to say beforehand. So the March Madness bracket as a whole, like the 63 games, it's like 9 quintillion to 1 odds of you choosing a perfect bracket. Now there will be lots and lots of people that have perfect brackets. Even if you just did a coin flip for every game, there's a 1 in 32,000-ish chance of having a perfect bracket. So we might have a perfect bracket on our hands. Hopefully.
Oh, for the second chance?
Yeah, for the second chance.
Oh, I was so confused. In my opinion, I don't think a perfect bracket will ever happen.
I saw a YouTube video yesterday about it because I was scrolling through, and it said you have a better chance of picking the same grain of sand 2 separate times randomly on any piece of sand on Earth, pick the same one twice than you do to have a perfect bracket.
Wow.
If you quantify that with all the beaches in America, all the sand everywhere,
oh man,
it's insane.
I think I've heard that. Yeah, that's ridiculous. I think we're trending away from a logical perfect bracket. So say even 20 years ago, you can basically knock off the 16 seeds, you can knock off the 15 seeds, you can knock off the 14 seeds, and at that point you're sitting with there's like 1 in 50 or 52 games to pick, and then there's some games in there that you just like mathematically they just don't happen. You know, you don't have like 12 seeds going to the Final Four, for example. So you can take all out those possibilities out. You don't have 11 seeds or 10 seeds or 9 seeds going to title games. You can take all those out. So I think for a long time you could like reduce the odds and reduce the odds and then reduce the odds, and like I think at some points you could probably have a like a 2 to the 20th power. So you're only having to pick 20 legitimate games, and that's within the realm of possibility. But now we saw UMBC, a 16 seed over 1 upset. So that's on the table now. This year, Oral Roberts is in the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed, only the second time ever. So that's on the table now. So there's fewer and fewer like guarantees, you know, and that's the. I've always thought that 2 to the 63 is a tad unfair, but it's getting closer to being fair when you have 16 seeds that are competitive with 1 seeds, 15 seeds that are beating 1 seeds every few years. Abilene Christian, Ohio, North Texas. Like when those are happening, yeah, absolutely, it's getting closer to that 9.1 quintillion. But here we actually have a shot.
Let's do it.
All right. So since there's 3 of us, if we get 2 votes for a team, that team progresses. So Gonzaga, Creighton, I will go with the Bulldogs.
I'll take Gonzaga too. Make it easy.
I will also take Gonzaga, but I think Creighton could keep it close if they shoot the way they did versus Ohio.
Okay. Who will be joining them? USC, 6 seed versus the 7 seed Oregon Ducks. I will go with Oregon.
I'm taking the Ducks too.
I'll also go with Oregon, but just because I had in my bracket. But the weird thing is I feel worse about this game than I would have before even Sunday, like before both of them played. Like Oregon killed Iowa, but I have a worse feeling now than I did after watching USC dismantle Kansas.
Yeah, USC. That was I think the biggest blowout in the history of Kansas basketball in the tournament.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, both Kansas and Iowa were extremely overrated in my mind. So it'll be a fun game either way.
Absolutely. All right, we're heading over to the East. Got number 1 seeded Michigan and number 4 seeded Florida State. I'm rocking with the Noles here.
Seminoles.
I am too.
All right. So that's 3 for 3.
No Michigan out here. We can't do that.
Michigan.
All right. We got the 11 seeded UCLA Bruins coming from the first 4, and the 2 seeded Alabama Crimson Tide. I think we know who I'm rocking with the All Pro Marlows, Alabama. I got Alabama.
I'll take Alabama too. Herb Jones.
I want to pick UCLA. They've played 2 incredible basketball games. Johnny Juzang is actually 3 basketball games, I guess. Johnny Juzang looks like one of the best players in the country. He's been scoring at an incredible rate, but I think Alabama has too much offense for UCLA.
All right, let's head up to the South. The number 1 seeded Baylor Bears versus the 5 seeded Villanova Wildcats. I don't know if either of you thought Villanova could get here. I know, Alec, you were big on Winthrop, but here we are. Villanova's in the Sweet 16 without their 2 best guards.
Yeah, Big East surprised me. I didn't think that either one of these 2 Big East teams were going to make it this far, and here we have 2 of them now in the Sweet 16. They're beating the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I don't think Creighton or Villanova are like top 16 teams. They just got the benefit of playing a non-Oregon State 12 seed and 13 seeds in the second round. So, like, I don't want to discredit Creighton or Villanova because they were very good regular season teams, but it seems a little disingenuous to have them as like top 16 teams now because Creighton's played pretty poorly the last month. They did play well against Ohio for the second half, and Villanova was limping into the tournament, and now they've gotten a 12 seed Winthrop that was a little overseeded probably because they were 23-1, and North Texas, who was I think objectively the worst round of 32 team because at least Oral Roberts can shoot the basketball. North Texas is just goofy.
I have no idea how they beat Purdue. I'm still mad that Creighton beat the Gauchos. They blew Santa Barbara blew that game. I think they got pretty unlucky with some calls down the stretch. They couldn't hit a layup for the win. It was a really unfortunate loss for Santa Barbara. And if they won that game, they're probably sitting here.
Yep,
Versus,
I agree.
Gonzaga. And I have that in my bracket. It was, I think they would have beaten Ohio as well. But I think we're all here.
Are we all in agreement with Baylor?
Yeah, take Baylor.
It's interesting. We document how bad the Big Ten is, but the Big 12 is equally as bad. The Big 12 had 8 teams in, and where the Big 12 and Big 10 were known as the best conferences the whole year. Texas was a 3 seed. Oklahoma, I guess they did the best they could.
Oklahoma State was a 4. West Virginia was a 3.
I guess Texas Tech did the best they could. West Virginia, they didn't play that good versus Moorhead.
No.
They could have won by more, and I feel like that Syracuse game was closer than it should have been because Syracuse didn't know how to break a trap in the last 2 minutes of the game. They could barely inbound the ball. Oklahoma State got killed by Oregon State. I guess Missouri. Who did Missouri lose to?
Oklahoma. Wait, no, Missouri's
in the SEC.
Yeah.
Missouri in the SEC.
I was waiting for you to say Colorado, actually.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, yeah, Colorado's in the Pac-12.
It's just like West Virginia shouldn't be in the Big 12. Missouri shouldn't be in the SEC. It's just Maryland should still be in the ACC. Rutgers shouldn't be in the Big 10. It's just
it's
market share.
I could have a full show on U Stadium ranting about conferences. But
yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it's like football. That's why Gonzaga probably is still in the West Coast Conference rather than the Pac-12 or even the Mountain West. Because does Gonzaga even have a football program?
No.
Got it.
I do a football bracket every year, and I always have Gonzaga losing in the first round because they don't even have a football team, so they default to a loss no matter who they're playing. Even if they're playing like Norfolk, at least if Norfolk has a team, they win.
I think they do have a team. I think they do.
Because I know Villanova got a team in the last 20 years. I know like UConn got a team in the last 20 years or so. But like I've never heard of like FCS Gonzaga.
Villanova had a draft pick.
Yeah, recently. I don't know who it was.
That's right, they did.
Passignon. He plays for the Chiefs.
He's the Chiefs like edge rusher.
I think
he was in the 2017 class, right?
Did
with Mahomes and
also have a recent draft pick?
Did who?
Georgetown?
Oh, I don't know. I know Passignon.
Villanova was actually, I think they're one of the better FCS teams now too. I think, or maybe not this year, but I think they were one of the higher seeds in the little FCS playoff bracket they do, at least a couple years ago. But,
right. So we agree on Baylor. Speaking of solid football teams there, now we have probably the best matchup actually outside of USC Oregon. I think this is the best matchup. This should be a lot of fun. Arkansas is a 3 seed. Oral Roberts is a 15. As I mentioned several times, only the second 15 seed to make it to the second weekend. Who we got, boys? Arkansas or Oral Roberts?
I'd like to take Oral Roberts, but I don't think it's going to break tie. I think you guys are both going to take Arkansas.
Yeah, I'm going with Arkansas.
Yeah, same.
I feel so foolish still by not having this game in my bracket. Told everyone about Oral Roberts, told everyone how they could easily beat Ohio State. I didn't pick it in my bracket, and if I had that, I assume I would have had Oral Roberts beating Virginia Tech because I had Virginia beating Florida. But it's whatever. I'll have to if you don't mind, can I actually talk about this game for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
They actually played already this season.
Yeah, I can pull that up.
Yeah, I have it up on my screen. But
There we go.
Arkansas actually, Eric Musselman must be a genius because Arkansas played 3 non-conference games versus teams, mid-majors that won a game in the tournament. Eric Musselman and Arkansas scheduled games this fall versus Oral Roberts, Abilene Christian, and North Texas. And it's just so weird. Like, if you're a team like Arkansas and you were projected to be a great team this year, and you're playing Oral Roberts on I think it was in December. You're playing Oral Roberts on a random December. The last thing you would ever think of, you would see this random team in the last week of March. And that's so funny to me. But what's interesting is Oral Roberts actually controlled the game for most of the game. I was reading about it and I watched a little bit of highlights I could find. Oral Roberts was up 12 at one point. They actually led for more of the game. And Arkansas did. Arkansas wound up winning by 11, though. But Arkansas shot 4 for 24 from 3. That's not going to happen again. But Oral Roberts actually shot 4 for 14 from 3, and that's probably not going to happen again either. And Arkansas was 41% from the field, and Oral Roberts was 39%. And I suspect all of those percentages to be much higher. And the game still was 87-76. So I think we could be in for a really high scoring game.
I have a feeling this is going to be what I thought Arkansas Colgate will be, but I think Oral Roberts can actually make jump shots. So this could be like a 90-84 game, I think, pretty easily.
Yeah, it will be really fun. Oral Roberts led this game for 20 minutes and 20 seconds, and Arkansas led the game with 17 and 17 seconds. Should be a really fun game, but I think Arkansas gets the job done.
Yeah,
but
I think Arkansas is just the best team they've played so far. I didn't think I often had Arkansas over Ohio State in my brackets, and the main one I had Arkansas over Ohio State. So
I don't know why. I love this Arkansas team. I don't know what it is, but I think it's also because the Thunder aren't gonna have a top 5 draft pick because Houston keeps losing and the Thunder somehow keep on winning with average starting 5 age that's younger than some of these NCAA tournament teams. I think I want Moses Moody if they're not gonna have a top 5 pick, but yeah, I love this Arkansas team.
All right, we're gonna slide on down to the Midwest. So we have the 8-seeded Loyola Chicago. They've been here before. In 2018, they went to the Final Four versus the red-hot 12-seeded Oregon State Beavers. I'm rocking with the Ramblers. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'll take the Ramblers too.
I'm going with. See, I wanted to pick Oregon State, but when you're so hot, I feel like a week off doesn't do you any good. But even though that same thing could have been applied to the Pac-12 championship in the first game of this tournament, but I just don't know if they can continue to shoot and score at the pace they're doing. And Loyola, whatever game plan Loyola had versus Illinois' offense lacked ball movement, it lacked spacing. Whatever they did worked incredibly well, and I'll go with Loyola.
And we got the number 11 Syracuse versus number 2 Houston. I have Syracuse.
I'll take the orange.
Let's
do it.
Buddy Buck already a better NBA player than Buddy.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay.
We talked about it. He's going to be Duncan Robinson at the next level.
Okay.
To the extreme.
Buddy Hield's Final Four run was fun. That was a fun Oklahoma team, but I think he's been a disappointment in the NBA. He's regressed the last couple of years.
He's still a great shooter. He's still 42%, right? Unless he's having a down year, because last year he was over 40%.
I think the Kings gave him a huge contract, though. I think
that's true.
He's
averaging 17 a game this year.
If we do an NBA podcast, we could probably spend a whole show talking about the Kings. That'd
be fun. Yeah, he's shooting 38% from 3 this year. For his career, he's 40%. I think Hield is. It's hard to call people busts in the NBA. Like say Andrew Wiggins, I think is a bust, but he's a solid player now. I don't know if Hield's really a bust because he wasn't like a number 1 pick. He was 6th with New Orleans, and then he was flipped in the Boogie trade. I don't know. I think he fits his role right, but Sacramento is a hot mess, and we could probably have a whole podcast just talking about the Sacramento Kings, let alone one show.
And all their busts. Nick Stauskas is my favorite Kings bust.
Oh boy! You also got Jimmer. You got Thomas Robinson, who they traded before he played half a season.
They got him though.
Georgios Papagiannis. Have you ever heard of him? He was a lottery pick.
I barely heard of him. The fact that they lucked into De'Aaron Fox because Fox should have been the first point guard taken that year, and they lucked into Tyrese Halliburton, and I'll never understand how he dropped to 11. I think the Knicks didn't pick him. If they didn't pick him, I don't know why a bunch of teams kept passing on. It was bizarre.
All right, so we're reaching the hour mark here, so we're just gonna rapid fire through these 4 games. I have Gonzaga over Oregon. Sadly, the end of the Ducks.
I want the Ducks.
I don't think Oregon can beat Gonzaga.
All right, we'll go there. Florida State, Alabama. I have the Crimson Tide.
Give me the Seminoles defense.
I have Florida State game. I have Florida State in my brackets, but I feel like I want to pick Alabama.
All right. Baylor, Arkansas. I'm going with the Razorbacks.
Let's go Arkansas.
Loyola, Chicago, Syracuse. I'm going with the Ramblers.
Yep.
Sorry.
Final Four.
All right. Gonzaga, Alabama. Sorry about that. Gonzaga, Alabama. I'm going with Gonzaga.
Yeah, go Gonzaga. They're too good.
Does Loyola make the run to the Final Four like they did in 1960, or the championship game like they did in 1963, or does Arkansas make their return for the first time in 25 years?
Ramblers.
Go Hogs.
Same. All right, and then do we have Gonzaga closing out the perfect season? I think they do.
Yeah, they do.
They cakewalked into it, but they'll do it.
All right. And since it's nice, we'll go 69-66. We will submit the bracket.
That's perfect, though, right there. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there you go.
Tiebreaker.
Well, I think we do need a tiebreaker because there's only 30,000 possibilities, and there's going to be like millions of these stupid things filled out. So, yeah, we need to wrap it up a little bit. Let me see if this comments. I thought Wisconsin was going to win it all. I didn't think they were going to beat North Carolina.
Yeah,
I didn't beat North Carolina.
Not gonna lie.
I'm
there.
going France and
Hey,
Koenig, by the way. Just put that out there.
they want to
North
get
Carolina played horrible in that game. Absolutely horrible.
so. Yeah. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Jacob. We will be back next Wednesday for our final show. We will be going deep dive in the 4 teams that make the Final Four. Hopefully, it's the teams we just chose. So if it's not, well, hey, we have more things to talk about. If it is, dope. Thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for being a part of the U Stadium group. Make sure you like the stream. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the Twitter, subscribe to the Instagram, and check us out on the app. I'm at Splash. Jacob is at Fifth and Goal, and Alec is at Antifa Alec. Good show today, guys, and we will see you next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern.
The best part about next week is the Elite Eight ends on Tuesday night.
Oh yes, exciting times to be alive. Yeah, it'll be like kind of a back-to-back. Tuesday night football games. I guess Alabama, Florida State might be a football game. Tuesday night basketball, Wednesday afternoon podcast. So let's get it.
It's funny. Alabama beat Maryland by 30, but if they played in football, it'd be a worse result.
Yeah, that's true.
Talia revenge game. What are you talking about? Come on.
All right. We're gonna wrap it up. We will see you guys next Wednesday. Peace.